The forest path to Thornhallow had no end. At least, that's what the villagers claimed. They said the trees grew closer together the deeper you walked, that the sunlight forgot how to reach the ground, that the man who lived at the end of that path hadn't been seen in 7 years because anyone who went looking never came back. Seraphine Vaillant didn't believe in ghost stories, but as the canopy above swallowed the last traces of afternoon light, as the temperature dropped and the silence grew thick enough to choke on, she began to wonder if belief mattered when the darkness felt this real. Her hands trembled at her sides. Not from cold, from rage. 3 days ago, she'd been standing in her father's study, watching Lord Aldrich Mercer smile that patient, poisoned smile as he explained exactly what would happen to her family. "Your father's debts have come due, Miss Vaillant." Aldrich had circled the room like a cat with a cornered mouse, his pale eyes never leaving her face. 12,000 sovereigns, a considerable sum. "You know he's ill. You know he can't—" "I know many things." Aldrich stopped before her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive masking something rotten. "I know your mother died paying for treatments that didn't work. I know your younger sister Elise is 15 and utterly dependent on you. I know your estate is the last valuable thing your family owns. What do you want?" "A simple errand. Nothing more." His mother, Lady Isolde Mercer, had watched from the corner, her silver hair immaculate, her expression carved from ice. She was the true architect of the Mercer fortune, everyone knew it. Aldrich was merely the face she presented to the world. "There's a man who lives in Thornhallow," Lady Isolde said, her voice like silk drawn over a blade. "He possesses something that belongs to our family, a document. Retrieve it for us, and your father's debts will be forgiven." "Thornhallow?" Seraphine's blood chilled. "You mean the ruins? Where the monster lives?" "Yes." Aldrich's smile widened. "The Beast of Thornhallow, they call him. Killed his own brother, they say. Went mad with grief, or guilt, and retreated into those woods to rot. You're asking me to walk into a murderer's domain. We're asking you to save your family." Lady Isolde rose, crossing to Seraphine with measured steps. "The document is a land deed. It belongs to us. The creature stole it years ago. We simply want it back. And if he kills me, then your sister will take your place." Lady Isolde's eyes were empty of mercy. "She's young, pretty. Perhaps she'd have better luck appealing to his appetites." The threat landed like a physical blow. "You wouldn't. We would. We will." Aldrich leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Unless you'd prefer a different arrangement. Marry me, Seraphine. Become a Mercer. Your family's debts disappear. Your sister is protected, and you never have to set foot in those woods." She'd looked at him then, really looked. At the cruelty hiding behind his charm, at the hunger in his eyes that had nothing to do with love. "I'll go to Thornhallow," she'd said. Now, 3 days later, she was paying for that choice. The trees had become a cage. The path had narrowed to barely a foot across. Roots clawed at her ankles, and branches reached for her hair like skeletal fingers. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but turning back meant Elise walking this same path. That wasn't an option. Seraphine pressed forward until the forest released her without warning. One moment she was fighting through undergrowth, the next she stood at the edge of a clearing, and before her rose Thornhallow. It wasn't ruins, not entirely. The manor house loomed against the darkening sky, all gray stone and shattered windows, ivy crawling up its walls like veins on a dying man. But lights burned in the lower floors. Smoke curled from a chimney. Someone lived here. Someone was waiting. The front door stood open. An invitation or a trap? She couldn't tell. Seraphine climbed the crumbling steps, her heart hammering against her ribs. She crossed the threshold into darkness, into silence, into the domain of the man everyone feared. Behind her, the door slammed shut, and from the shadows, a voice spoke. "You're either very brave or very foolish to come here alone, Miss Vaillant." He knew her name. Seraphine spun toward the voice, her back pressed against the cold door. The entrance hall stretched before her, vast and decayed, moonlight streaming through broken windows to illuminate dust motes dancing in the air. A grand staircase climbed into darkness. Portraits lined the walls, their faces obscured by grime and time. And standing in the center of it all was a man who looked nothing like a monster. He was tall, taller than Aldrich, broader through the shoulders, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a jaw shadowed by days of stubble. His clothes were simple, a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark trousers, worn boots. He held no weapon, made no threatening move, but his eyes, pale green, almost luminous in the dim light, watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "How do you know my name?" she demanded, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I know everyone the Mercers sent to die." He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the stone floor. "You're the fourth this year. The others were men. Soldiers mostly. They came with swords and fire and confidence." He stopped an arm's length away. "You came with nothing but a thin cloak and terror in your eyes. Why? I'm not here to fight you." "No? Then why are you here?" "To retrieve a document, a land deed. Lady Isolde says you stole it." Something flickered across his face. Amusement or anger, she couldn't tell. "Lady Isolde says many things. Most of them are lies." "So you don't have it?" "I didn't say that." He circled her slowly, assessing. "I said she lies. There's a difference." Seraphine's legs threatened to give out beneath her. The journey, the fear, the days without proper sleep. It all crashed over her at once. She swayed. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. "When did you last eat?" His voice was different now, still rough, but threaded with something that might have been concern. "Yesterday, maybe the day before. I don't remember." He cursed under his breath, then lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Seraphine's instinct was to fight, but her body refused to cooperate. She was carried through the decaying hall, past doors hanging from hinges, past rooms filled with covered furniture, until they reached a kitchen that blazed with warmth. A fire roared in the hearth. A pot of something savory hung over the flames. The man set her in a chair beside the fire and pressed a cup of hot broth into her hands. "Drink, slowly." She obeyed because she had no strength to resist. The broth was simple but good. Vegetables, herbs, a depth of flavor that suggested someone here knew how to cook. "You're not what I expected," she admitted when the cup was half empty. "What did you expect? Fangs? Claws? A necklace of human bones? Something closer to a monster. That's what they call you." "They call me many things." He sat across from her, firelight carving shadows into his angular face. "The beast of Thornhallow, the butcher of Ashford, the man who murdered his own brother for a title he never even claimed." Seraphine's hand froze around the cup. "Ashford? You mean—" "I mean that 7 years ago I was Cale Ashford, Duke of Ravensmoor, heir to one of the largest fortunes in the Northern Territories." His smile was bitter, broken. "Until the Mercers decided that fortune should belong to them." The cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stone floor. She hadn't been sent to retrieve a document from a monster. She'd been sent to die at the hands of a banished duke, a man the Mercers had already destroyed once. And now she understood why they wanted her dead. Seraphine couldn't move, couldn't think. The name echoed through her mind like a funeral bell. Cale Ashford, the Duke of Ravensmoor. Everyone knew the story. 7 years ago, the Duke's younger brother, Lord Bastian Ashford, had been found dead in his chambers, strangled. The evidence pointed to Cale, a bloodied cravat in his possession, witnesses who'd heard them arguing that night, a motive rooted in jealousy and inheritance disputes. The trial had been swift, the verdict devastating. Rather than face execution, Cale Ashford had been stripped of his title, banished from society, and condemned to exile in the very estate where his family's fortune had begun. Thornhallow. Most believed he'd died within the first year. The rest believed he'd gone mad. No one believed he was innocent. "You're staring," Kale said, still seated across from her. "I'm used to it. But I'd appreciate knowing what thoughts are making you look at me like I might devour you whole. You were convicted of murder. I was convicted of a crime I didn't commit. There's a difference. The evidence was fabricated. Every piece of it." His voice remained steady, but his hands clenched on his knees. The cravat was planted. The witnesses were bribed. The motive was invented by people who needed me gone. The Mercers. The Mercers. He stood, pacing to the fire. Bastian discovered what they were doing, how they'd been systematically acquiring land through forged debts and manufactured defaults. He was going to expose them, so they killed him and made certain I'd take the blame. Seraphine's stomach churned. Forged debts, manufactured defaults, her father's sudden financial ruin, the impossible sum that had appeared from nowhere, the pressure to sell their estate at a fraction of its value. "They're doing it to my family," she whispered. "The debt. It's not real. It's never real. That's how they work." Kale turned to face her. "They identify vulnerable families, fabricate obligations, and then offer a choice. Surrender everything or face destruction. Your father refused to sell, so they created a debt he couldn't pay. And sent me here to die. To disappear. They'll tell everyone you wandered into the forest searching for some fantasy treasure and never returned. A tragic accident. Meanwhile, your father will be too broken with grief to fight, and they'll take everything. My sister. They threatened to send her next if I refused. They won't stop with your family, they never do. I've watched from these woods for 7 years, documenting every family they've ruined, every life they've destroyed." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw a fury that matched her own. "I've been waiting for the right moment to strike back, the right weapon. And you think that's me? I think you walked into this house prepared to face a monster because you refused to let your sister take your place. I think you negotiated with people who wanted you dead and found a way to survive. I think you have more courage than anyone the Mercers have ever targeted." He crossed to her, kneeling so their eyes were level. "I have evidence, Seraphine. 7 years of documentation, forged signatures, bribed officials, murdered witnesses. Everything I need to destroy them. What I don't have is access to their world. I'm a ghost, a cautionary tale. I can't walk into their ballrooms and gatherings. I can't get close enough to deliver the killing blow. But I can. You could be so much more." His voice dropped. "The Mercers expect you to die here. Let them believe you have. Stay. Let me train you, arm you, transform you into something they'll never see coming, and when the time is right, we'll walk into their world together and burn it to the ground. What do I get in return? Your family's debts erased. I have enough hidden wealth to cover 10 times what they claim you owe. Your father's estate restored to his name. Your sister protected by resources the Mercers can't touch. And if we fail, then we die. But we die fighting, not cowering." He extended his hand. "I'm offering you a partnership, Seraphine, not servitude. You help me destroy the people who murdered my brother and stole my life. I help you save your family and claim vengeance for everything they've taken from you." Seraphine looked at his hand. Scarred knuckles, calloused palm. The hand of a man who'd spent 7 years surviving in exile, planning and waiting. 3 days ago, she'd refused to marry Aldrich Mercer because she'd seen the monster behind his smile. Now she was being asked to ally with a man the world called a monster, and she saw nothing but truth in his eyes. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I want your word that we pursue justice, not just revenge. The families they've destroyed deserve restitution." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. "Agreed. Justice first. Revenge as a bonus. And if I ever become a liability, if my presence puts the mission at risk, you let me walk away. No arguments. You have my word?" Seraphine took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and in that moment, a pact was sealed that neither of them fully understood. "Welcome to the war, Miss Violent," Kyle said quietly. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your training begins." He released her hand and moved toward the door. "One more thing," she called after him. He paused, looking back. "Why do you live like this? In the dark? In the ruins? You said you have wealth. Why stay here?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then softly, "Because Thornhallow is where they sent me to be forgotten. I stay to remind myself every single day what they took from me." His eyes hardened. "And to make sure that when I finally emerge, I remember exactly why they need to fall." He disappeared into the shadows, leaving Seraphine alone with the fire and the weight of the choice she'd just made. She'd walked into this house expecting death. Instead, she'd found something far more dangerous: hope. Seraphine woke to sunlight. That alone was disorienting. She'd expected Thornhallow to be perpetual darkness, a tomb of shadows and decay. Instead, warm morning light streamed through clean windows, illuminating a bedroom that was modest but comfortable. Fresh linens, a wash basin with actual soap, a dress laid across a chair, simple gray wool, but well made. Someone had been here while she slept. She dressed quickly, her body still aching from the journey, and opened the door to find a hallway that looked nothing like the ruined entrance she'd stumbled through the night before. The decay, she realized, was a mask. Beyond the crumbling facade of Thornhallow's public face lay a functioning household. As she walked, she discovered rooms that had been carefully restored, a library stacked with books, a sitting room with furniture that gleamed with polish, a dining hall where the scent of fresh bread lingered in the air, and people. There were people here. A woman with silver-streaked hair emerged from a doorway carrying linens. She stopped when she saw Seraphine, her weathered face breaking into a cautious smile. "You're awake. Good. His Grace said you'd sleep through breakfast, but I kept a plate warm." "His Grace?" "Old habits." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Marin. I've managed this household for 30 years, through the old Duke, through Master Kale, through the exile. Come, you need food before he works you into the ground." Seraphine followed Marin to the kitchen, where the promised plate waited. Eggs, bread, preserves, a pot of strong tea. She ate while Marin talked, learning that Thornhallow sheltered 11 souls, servants who'd refused to abandon Kale after his conviction, farmers from neighboring lands who'd lost everything to Mercer's schemes, a blacksmith whose testimony against the family had cost him his trade. "We're the forgotten," Marin explained. "The ones they tried to silence. His Grace gave us a home when no one else would. He built a sanctuary. He built an army." Marin's eyes hardened. "Every person here has a reason to want the Mercers destroyed. We've been waiting 7 years for the chance." After breakfast, Marin led her to the manor's east wing, where Kale waited in a room that had been converted into a training space. Mats covered the floor. Weapons lined the walls. Swords, daggers, staffs. A wooden dummy stood in the corner, its surface scarred from countless strikes. "You're late," Kale said without turning. "I was learning that your ruined manor is actually a secret fortress filled with people who want to burn the Mercers to ash. Now you know why I chose Thornhallow." He faced her, and in the daylight she could see the toll of 7 years in exile, the fine lines around his eyes, the scar that traced his jaw, and the way he held himself like a man who'd forgotten how to relax. "The world thinks I'm dead or mad. That makes this place invisible. No one looks for threats in a grave. Clever. Necessary." He tossed her a wooden practice sword. "Let's see what I'm working with." She caught it clumsily. "I've never held a sword in my life." "Then today you learn." The next hour was brutal. Kale demonstrated stances, grips, basic strikes, then made her repeat them until her arms burned and her legs trembled. He corrected her posture with sharp commands, adjusted her grip with impersonal efficiency, and pushed her past the point where she wanted to quit. When he finally called a halt, Seraphine collapsed onto a bench, gasping. "You're weak," Kyle said. "Untrained. Soft from a life of drawing rooms and embroidery. Thank you for the encouragement. I'm not finished." He crouched before her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're also stubborn, quick to learn, and you didn't complain once. That's more than most soldiers manage on their first day." Was that a compliment? It was an observation. He stood. "Tomorrow we add footwork. The day after, defense. By the end of the month, you'll know enough to survive a fight. By the end of 6 weeks, you'll know enough to win one." 6 weeks? I thought we were in a hurry. We are. But rushing gets people killed. He moved toward the door. "Rest this afternoon. Tonight, your real education begins." "Which is?" He paused at the threshold. "Learning everything the Mercers don't want anyone to know." That evening, Cale took her to a room she hadn't discovered during her morning exploration, a hidden study behind a false wall in the library. Inside, every surface was covered with documents, maps marked with red pins, ledgers filled with columns of numbers, letters, some yellowed with age, others fresh enough that the ink still smelled sharp. 7 years of evidence, Cale said quietly. Every family they've destroyed, every debt they've fabricated, every official they've bribed, every witness they've silenced. Seraphine moved through the room, overwhelmed. This is enough to bring them down. This is enough to make accusations. Bringing them down requires proof they can't deny, witnesses they can't discredit, and a stage where the whole world is watching. He pulled a document from the wall. And this. She took it. A land deed, ornate and official, bearing a seal she didn't recognize. "This is what they sent me to retrieve. This is the original deed to Ashford lands, lands the Mercers claim they purchased legally from my father before his death. But this deed proves my father never sold. The signature on their version is forged. If this becomes public, their entire empire unravels." "Then why haven't you used it?" "Because the moment I surface, I'm a convicted murderer making desperate accusations. They'll claim I forged this document. They'll say I'm lying. And without someone credible to present it, someone society hasn't already condemned, it's worthless." Understanding dawned. "You need me to be your voice. I need you to be my blade." His eyes locked onto hers. "The Mercers know my face, my voice, my every weakness. They don't know you. By the time they realize what you are, it will be too late." Seraphine set the deed down carefully. "Show me everything," she said. "Every document, every name, every connection. If I'm going to destroy them, I need to know exactly who I'm fighting." Something that might have been approval flickered across Cale's face. He reached for the first ledger. Then, "Let's begin." 6 weeks transformed Seraphine into someone she barely recognized. Her body hardened from daily training, sword work in the mornings, hand-to-hand combat in the afternoons. The softness Cale had criticized melted away, replaced by lean muscle and reflexes she hadn't known she possessed. Marin taught her to move through a room without being noticed. The blacksmith, a giant named Corwin, taught her to read an opponent's intentions before they struck. A former lady's maid named Thessa drilled her on etiquette, accent, and the 1,000 small details that separated nobility from pretenders. But it was the evenings with Cale that changed her most. Night after night, they sat in the hidden study, working through documents by candlelight. She learned the names of 37 families the Mercers had destroyed. She memorized the network of bribed officials who protected them. Magistrates, tax collectors, even a bishop who'd bless their charitable donations while ignoring their crimes. She traced the web of forged debts back 15 years, to the moment Aldrich's father had first realized that fraud was more profitable than honest business. And slowly, she learned about Cale himself. He revealed pieces of his past reluctantly, like a man pulling splinters from his own skin. His childhood in these halls, happy until his mother died when he was 12. His father's slow decline into grief and neglect. His brother Bastian, 3 years younger, who'd worshipped Cale with the devotion only little brothers could manage. "We were supposed to protect each other," Cale said one night, staring into the fire. I was the heir, but Bastian was the clever one. He noticed things I missed. Patterns. Inconsistencies. Like the Mercer schemes. He found a discrepancy in our family accounts. Money that should have been there but wasn't. He traced it back to a loan my father had supposedly taken from Lord Mercer. A loan my father never remembered signing. The same method they used on my family. Exactly. Bastian was going to expose them. He'd gathered evidence, arranged meetings with magistrates who weren't yet in Mercer pockets. He was 23 years old and absolutely certain that truth would prevail. Cale's voice cracked almost imperceptibly. The night before his meetings, they came for him. I was away, deliberately lured to a hunting party hosted by a Mercer ally. By the time I returned, Bastian was dead, and every piece of evidence he'd gathered had vanished. He looked at Seraphine. They staged the scene to implicate me. The bloody cravat. The argument witnesses claimed to overhear. All fabricated. All flawless. And no one believed you. Why would they? I was the jealous older brother. The one who stood to inherit everything if Bastian died. The Mercers had been planting that narrative for months. Subtle comments at parties, rumors about our supposed rivalry. When Bastian died, everyone already believed I had motive. Seraphine reached across the space between them and touched his hand. He flinched but didn't pull away. I believe you, she said quietly. And when this is over, everyone will know the truth. For a long moment, Kyle was silent. Then his fingers turned, interlacing with hers. You're the first person to say that in 7 years? Then everyone else was blind. The fire crackled between them and something shifted. A wall crumbling, a distance closing. Cale's thumb traced a circle on her palm, and Seraphine felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the flames. Then the door burst open. Corwin stood in the threshold, breathing hard, his massive frame blocking the light from the corridor. Riders approaching, 4 of them, they're wearing Mercer colors. Cale was on his feet instantly, the vulnerable man of moments ago replaced by the commander. How far? 10 minutes, maybe less. Seraphine, stay here, don't make a sound. He was already moving. Corwin, gather the others. We hold positions until we know what they want. Cale. Seraphine started. He turned at the door, his expression fierce. They can't know you're alive. If they find you here, everything ends. Stay hidden, promise me. She wanted to argue, wanted to. Every instinct screamed to fight beside him. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about protecting her from danger. It was about protecting 7 years of planning from collapsing in a single night. I promise. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone with the evidence of crimes that could destroy an empire, and the terrifying certainty that the Mercers had found them far sooner than anyone expected. The riders didn't attack. Seraphine watched from a hidden alcove as Cale met them at the gates. 4 men in Mercer livery, led by a captain with a scarred face and suspicious eyes. They spoke for 20 minutes while she held her breath, unable to hear the words, but reading the tension in every gesture. Finally, the riders turned and vanished back into the forest. Cale found her in the study an hour later, his expression unreadable. They weren't looking for you. Not specifically. Then what? Lady Isolde has declared you officially dead. A tragic accident. You wandered into the forest, became lost, fell victim to the wilderness or the monster. Your father has been informed. Your sister is being comforted by Aldrich himself. The words hit like physical blows. Elise, they're going to... Not yet. The riders were here to confirm that no one had passed through Thornhallow recently. Routine patrol. They suspect nothing. But they're getting closer to my sister. Which means we need to move faster. Cale spread a map across the table. There's an opportunity. 3 weeks from now, Lord Ashworth is hosting his annual autumn ball. Every family of consequence will attend, including the Mercers. You want me to go? Alone? I want you to go as Lady Evangeline Ashworth, Lord Ashworth's niece, recently returned from 5 years abroad. He owes me his life, long story, and he's agreed to provide the cover. Seraphine studied the map. I walk into a ballroom filled with people who know my face. If anyone recognizes me, that's why we test it first. Cale pointed to a mark on the map. The village of Millbrook. Market day is tomorrow. It's small, but several merchants who do business with the Mercers will be there. You go as Lady Evangeline. You interact, you observe, you gather information. If the disguise holds against people who've never met you, we'll know it can hold against those who have. And if it doesn't hold, then we adjust. Learn. Try again. His eyes met hers. You've trained for 6 weeks. You've learned their secrets, their methods, their weaknesses. Tomorrow you prove you can use that knowledge. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something closer to anticipation. Whoa, what exactly am I looking for in Millbrook? There's a merchant named Renard Sloan. He handles the Mercer's rural accounts, debt collection, property transfers, the dirty work that stays far from London drawing rooms. Get close to him. Learn what he knows about upcoming acquisitions. You think he'll talk to a stranger? I think he'll talk to a beautiful woman who shows interest in investment opportunities. A ghost of a smile crossed Cale's face. You underestimate your own weapons, Seraphine. The next morning, Seraphine rode into Millbrook wearing a dress of deep blue silk, her hair styled in the latest fashion, every inch the wealthy noblewoman exploring the countryside. Thessa had transformed her. Cosmetics to alter her features, posture adjustments that changed how she moved, an accent polished to aristocratic perfection. The market buzzed with activity. Seraphine moved through the crowd, playing her role, examining fabrics, inquiring about prices, letting her fabricated wealth speak for itself. Renard Sloan found her within the hour. He was a thin man with clever eyes and ink-stained fingers, exactly the type to manage someone else's crimes while keeping his own hands technically clean. My lady, forgive my forwardness. I couldn't help but notice your interest in our local wares. I'm Renard Sloan. I handle certain investment opportunities for discerning clients. What sort of opportunities? Land, primarily. The Northern Territories are experiencing a period of transition, properties becoming available at remarkably favorable rates. Favorable for whom? His smile was oil on water. For those wise enough to act quickly. Seraphine spent 30 minutes extracting information, the names of families facing foreclosure, the timeline for upcoming seizures, the identity of a magistrate who'd recently been convinced to expedite certain proceedings. Sloan talked freely, seeing only a wealthy woman to impress, never suspecting she was cataloging every word for use against his masters. When she finally excused herself, her mind was racing. She rode back to Thornhallow as the sun began to set, finding Cale waiting at the gates. Well, 3 families targeted for next month. A magistrate named Vance who's been taking bribes for 2 years. And a property seizure scheduled for the week before the Ashworth Ball. A widow named Mrs. Caldwell whose husband died in a suspicious accident. Cale's expression shifted. You got all that in one conversation? Sloan likes the sound of his own voice. I just had to listen. And no one recognized you? No suspicions? I was Lady Evangeline Ashworth, recently returned from abroad looking for investment opportunities. She dismounted, unable to hide her satisfaction. The disguise held perfectly. For a moment, Cale simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile, the first she'd seen that reached his eyes. You're ready. I know. The Ashworth Ball is in 3 weeks. The Mercers will be there. Aldrich, Lady Isolde, everyone who matters. He took her horse's reins, his hand brushing hers. 3 weeks, and we walk into their world. Seraphine met his gaze, feeling the weight of everything they'd built settling onto her shoulders. 3 weeks, she agreed. And then we make them pay. The Ashworth estate glittered like a jewel against the autumn night. Hundreds of candles blazed in every window, their light spilling across manicured gardens where guests strolled in silks and velvets. Carriages lined the drive, each one bearing crests of families whose names Seraphine had memorized from Cale's documents. She sat beside him in Lord Ashworth's private carriage, her hands steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "Remember," Cale said quietly, "you are Lady Evangeline Ashworth. You've spent 5 years in Vienna. You're curious about English society but slightly bored by its provincial concerns. You find Aldrich Mercer charming but transparent. And if he recognizes me? He won't. You're not the woman he pushed into desperation 2 months ago. You're someone entirely new." Cale's hand found hers in the darkness. "But if something goes wrong, find me. Don't try to handle it alone." "You'll be there? Inside?" Lord Ashworth is introducing his reclusive business partner from the continent, a man named Cale Varenne. His smile was razor-sharp. "The Mercers have never seen my face up close. They convicted me through proxies and paperwork. Tonight I'll be standing 10 feet away, and they won't know they're looking at the ghost they created." The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. Seraphine stepped out into the light, and Lady Evangeline Ashworth was born. The ballroom was overwhelming, a sea of faces, a symphony of conversation, the weight of wealth pressing in from every direction. Lord Ashworth, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a soldier's bearing, greeted her warmly and made introductions that established her cover with practiced ease. Within an hour, she'd spoken to a dozen guests, each conversation a delicate extraction of information wrapped in social pleasantries. She learned which families whispered about Mercer debts. She identified allies who might be turned against them. She mapped the room's politics with the precision Cale had taught her. And then she saw him. Aldrich Mercer stood near the refreshment table, resplendent in black and gold, laughing at something a young woman had said. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome, confident, utterly convinced of his own invincibility. Beside him stood Lady Isolde, her silver hair arranged in an elaborate style, her eyes scanning the room with predatory attention. Seraphine's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to breathe, to remember who she was supposed to be. Lady Isolde's gaze swept past her without pause. No recognition, no suspicion. The disguise was holding. Then Aldrich turned, and their eyes met across the ballroom. For one terrible moment, Seraphine was certain he knew. Certain the mask had slipped. Certain everything was about to collapse. But Aldrich simply smiled. The same charming, predatory smile he'd used when he'd offered her marriage or death, and raised his glass in her direction. An invitation. Seraphine smiled back, feeling the weight of 2 months of training settle into her bones. He didn't recognize the woman he'd tried to destroy, and that was going to be his greatest mistake. Aldrich approached her within minutes, his confidence radiating like heat from a flame. "I don't believe we've met." He bowed with practiced elegance. "Aldrich Mercer. And you are?" "Lady Evangeline Ashworth, Lord Ashworth's niece." "Ashworth's niece? Strange. He's never mentioned family." "We've been estranged. 5 years in Vienna tends to create distance." She accepted the glass of champagne he offered. "But I grew tired of continental society. English gentlemen are so much more direct." "Direct?" His smile widened. "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" "That depends entirely on the gentleman." They talked for 20 minutes, and Seraphine played her role flawlessly, interested but not eager, intelligent but not threatening, beautiful but not desperate. Aldrich preened under her attention, revealing more with every boast about Mercer investments and influence. Across the room, she caught glimpses of Cale moving through the crowd as the mysterious Mr. Varenne. He spoke with bankers, politicians, minor nobles, each conversation another thread in the web they were weaving. Then Lady Isolde appeared at Aldrich's elbow. "My son neglects his duties." Her voice was frost-wrapped in silk. "There are other guests who deserve his attention." "Mother, I know what you were doing." Lady Isolde's eyes fixed on Seraphine, and this time the assessment was thorough. Lady Evangeline, is it? You have a familiar quality. Have we met before? I don't believe so, Lady Mercer. Perhaps you simply remind me of someone. She didn't look away. Someone who disappointed us greatly. Seraphine's pulse spiked, but her expression remained serene. I hope I prove less disappointing. We shall see. Lady Isolde took Aldrich's arm. Come. Lord Ashworth wishes to introduce his business partner, some foreign investor. We should assess whether he's useful. They moved away, and Seraphine released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Too close. Lady Isolde suspected something, even if she couldn't identify what. She needed to warn Kael, but before she could move, a hand closed around her elbow. Lady Evangeline. A man's voice, unfamiliar. A word in private, if you please. She turned to find a young man with nervous eyes and ink-stained fingers. It took her a moment to place him. Renard Sloane, the merchant from Millbrook. Mr. Sloane, what a surprise. I thought so too. His grip tightened. Because I've been thinking about our conversation, about the questions you asked, and I've realized something quite interesting. Oh? You're not Lady Evangeline Ashworth. I don't know who you are, but you're not her. His voice dropped to a whisper. And I think Lady Mercer would pay handsomely to learn that someone is impersonating nobility at this ball. Seraphine's blood ran cold. You're mistaken. Am I? Then you won't mind if I share my concerns with our hosts. He smiled, and it was nothing like the eager merchant she'd manipulated in Millbrook. Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss alternative arrangements. Somewhere private. He was blackmailing her. This insignificant man with his ledgers and his greed had recognized something wrong, and now he thought he could profit from it. Seraphine glanced across the ballroom. Kael was deep in conversation with Lord Ashworth and Lady Isolde, too far away to help. She was on her own. Very well, she said softly. Let's discuss this privately. She let Sloane lead her toward the terrace doors, her mind racing through every option Kael had trained her to see. She wasn't the helpless woman Aldrich had tried to destroy, and Renard Sloane was about to learn exactly how dangerous she'd become. The terrace was empty, the autumn air sharp enough to keep other guests inside. Sloane released her arm and turned, his expression shifting from nervous to calculating. Now then, let's negotiate. What do you want? Information. Who are you really? Who sent you? And what are you planning? Seraphine assessed the situation. Sloane was alone. No witnesses. The ballroom noise would cover any sounds from the terrace. I'm exactly who I claim to be. You're lying. He stepped closer. In Millbrook, you asked questions no real investor would ask. You wanted names, timelines, and specific details about Mercer operations. That's not curiosity. That's intelligence gathering. Perhaps I'm simply thorough. Perhaps you're a spy. His eyes narrowed. The Mercers have enemies. Powerful ones. Someone is funding an operation against them, and I think you're part of it. And if I am, then I want in. The calculation in his expression intensified. I've worked for the Mercers for 8 years. I know where the bodies are buried, literally in some cases. I know which documents are forged, which officials are compromised, which families were destroyed through fraud rather than legitimate debt. Seraphine went still. You'd betray them? I'd survive them. Lady Isolde is getting paranoid. She's starting to eliminate loose ends. People who know too much. Fear flickered beneath his bravado. 3 of my colleagues have had accidents in the past 6 months. I'm not waiting to be fourth. So you want protection? I want out. Completely. New name, new location. Enough money to disappear. He pulled a small leathered journal from his coat. In exchange, I'll give you this. Every transaction I've handled for the past 8 years. Names, dates, amounts, signatures. Enough to destroy the Mercers 10 times over. Seraphine's heart pounded. This was more than they'd hoped for. A witness willing to testify. Documentation that couldn't be dismissed as fabrication. How do I know this isn't a trap? Because if it were a trap, Lady Isolde would already be here. Sloane glanced nervously at the ballroom doors. I'm taking an enormous risk approaching you. The least you can do is take me seriously. Seraphine made her decision. She reached out and took the journal, tucking it swiftly into the hidden pocket Thessa had sewn into her dress. If this is genuine. The terrace doors burst open. Aldrich Mercer stepped through, his expression murderous. Sloane, I thought I saw you sneaking off with my new acquaintance. His eyes moved between them, cataloging, calculating. What are you discussing so privately? Business opportunities, Sloane said, his voice cracking. Lady Evangeline expressed interest in... Don't. Aldrich moved closer, and Seraphine saw the predator beneath the charm. I'm not an idiot, Sloane. You've been nervous for weeks. Jumpy. Looking over your shoulder. He smiled coldly. Mother was right. You've become a liability. Aldrich, I would never... You would. You are. Aldrich pulled something from his coat. Moonlight gleamed on metal. A pistol, small but deadly. The question is what you've already told our lovely guest. Seraphine stepped forward. He told me nothing. We were simply... quiet. The pistol swung toward her. I don't know who you are, Lady Evangeline, but I know you're not what you seem. Mother sensed it immediately. Something familiar about you. Something wrong. His eyes narrowed, studying her face in the moonlight. Remove your mask, he said softly. Show me who you really are. I'm not wearing a mask. Everyone wears masks. He cocked the pistol. I'm going to count to 3. Then I'm going to shoot Mr. Sloane. Then I'm going to take you somewhere private and discover exactly what you know and who sent you. Aldrich. 1. Sloane whimpered. 2. Seraphine's mind raced. No weapons, no allies. 10 feet of terrace between her and a loaded pistol. Thura. She's Seraphine Valent. A voice cut through the night. Cale stepped from the shadows at the terrace's edge, his own pistol raised. The woman you sent to die 2 months ago. The woman you left to the forest. Aldrich's face went white. That's impossible. She's dead. Clearly not. Cale moved closer, positioning himself between Seraphine and the pistol. Lower your weapon, Lord Mercer. This terrace has 17 windows facing it. At least a dozen guests have a clear view of everything happening here. Aldrich's hand trembled. You. I know your voice. You should. You spent 2 years building a case to destroy me. Cale smiled, and it was terrible. Hello, Aldrich. It's been 7 years. Did you miss me? The pistol clattered to the ground. Cale Ashford, Aldrich breathed. The Banished Duke. The same. And I've come to collect what your family owes me. The next few minutes blurred into controlled chaos. Lord Ashworth appeared with 2 trusted footmen, securing Aldrich and Sloane in separate rooms, while Cale and Seraphine retreated to a private study. The ball continued below, guests unaware that everything had shifted. We need to move quickly, Cale said, pacing before the fireplace. Aldrich will be missed. Lady Isolde will come looking. We have maybe an hour before this becomes public. Sloane gave me his journal. I have it. Seraphine pulled the leather book from her hidden pocket. 8 years of transactions. Cale took the journal, scanning pages with growing intensity. Names, dates, amounts. This is everything, Seraphine. Combined with the land deed, this is everything we need. Sloane wants protection. Safe passage out of the country. He'll have it, after he testifies. Cale set the journal down, his expression shifting. You could have been killed tonight, if I'd been 30 seconds later. But you weren't. I almost was. I was across the ballroom when I saw Aldrich follow you. By the time I reached the terrace, he stopped, his jaw tight. I thought I'd lost you. You didn't. This time. He crossed to her, close enough that she could see the fear beneath his control. When this started, you were a weapon, a means to an end. I told myself that keeping you alive was strategic. And now? Now the thought of losing you makes strategy irrelevant. His hand rose to her face, trembling slightly. Somewhere between training sessions and midnight research, between watching you transform into someone extraordinary, I stopped seeing a weapon and started seeing… What? Everything. His voice broke on the word. You're everything, Seraphine. And I don't know when that happened or how to handle it, but I know that if Aldrich had hurt you tonight, I would have burned this entire estate to the ground. Seraphine's breath caught. Kale, I know this isn't the time. I know we have an hour before everything explodes. I know. She kissed him. Not strategically. Not for show. She kissed him because 6 weeks of proximity had become something neither of them planned, because his hands on her face felt like coming home, because the man everyone called a monster had shown her more tenderness than anyone who'd claimed to love her. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Kale rested his forehead against hers. That was unexpected, he murmured. That was inevitable. She smiled despite everything. We can figure out what it means later. Right now, we have an hour to destroy the Mercers. Together? Together. A knock shattered the moment. Lord Ashworth's voice came through the door. We have a problem. Lady Isolde is demanding to see her son, and she's brought reinforcements. Kale and Seraphine exchanged glances. The final battle had begun. Lady Isolde Mercer stood in the center of Lord Ashworth's great hall, flanked by 6 armed men who'd arrived under the pretense of family security. Her silver eyes swept the room with barely contained fury. Lord Ashworth, this is most irregular. My son has been detained without explanation. I demand his immediate release. Your son was detained because he drew a weapon on 2 of my guests. Lord Ashworth's voice was steel. Attempted murder at a social function tends to raise concerns. Lies. Aldrich would never. I witnessed it personally. Kale stepped forward, and the room went silent. As did Miss Valiant. Lady Isolde's gaze snapped to him, then to Seraphine standing at his side. Recognition dawned slowly. First confusion, then disbelief, then a fury so intense it seemed to crack her icy composure. You. The word was poison. You're supposed to be dead. Both of you. Disappointment seems to follow your family, Lady Mercer. Seraphine moved closer, feeling the weight of every person watching. Lord Ashworth's guests, drawn by the commotion, crowding into doorways and along the gallery above. Your son sent me into the forest to die. I survived. Your family convicted an innocent man of murder. He survived. Now we're here to collect what you owe. This is absurd. Guards, remove these imposters. No one moved. Your guards are currently being held in the wine cellar, Lord Ashworth said mildly. My staff was quite efficient. Then I'll have you arrested. All of you. For kidnapping. For conspiracy. For what, Lady Mercer? Kale pulled Sloane's journal from his coat. For possessing documentation of 37 fraudulent debt schemes? For having evidence of bribed magistrates and forged signatures? For knowing exactly how your family murdered my brother and framed me for the crime? The crowd murmured. Lady Isolde's face went white. That's impossible. Those records were destroyed. Not all of them. Seraphine took the journal, opening it to a marked page. August 15th, 8 years ago. A payment of 2,000 sovereigns to Magistrate Vance for expedited foreclosure proceedings against the Hartwell family. Shall I continue? November 3rd, 7 years ago. Kale's voice carried through the hall. Payment to 3 witnesses who would later testify at my trial. 5,000 sovereigns each. The notation reads, testimony preparation. He reached into his coat again and produced the land deed, the document Lady Isolde had sent Seraphine to retrieve. And this, the original deed to Ashford lands, the one that proves my father never sold to your family, the one that proves the signature on your version is a forgery. The murmurs grew to shocked exclamations. This is fabrication, Lady Isolde snarled. Desperate lies from a convicted murderer and his accomplice. Then you won't mind an official investigation. Lord Ashworth stepped forward. I've already sent riders to London. The Lord Chancellor will arrive by tomorrow evening. as will representatives from every family named in this journal. You have no authority. I have the authority of truth. Seraphine faced the crowd directly. My name is Seraphine Vaillant. 2 months ago, Aldrich Mercer threatened to destroy my family unless I married him or retrieved a document from a man he called a monster. When I refused the marriage, he sent me into the forest, expecting me to die. She let the words land. Instead, I found a man who'd spent 7 years gathering evidence of Mercer crimes. A man who lost his brother, his title, his freedom, because he stood in the way of their greed. A man who showed me more honor in exile than Aldrich Mercer ever showed in a ballroom. Pretty words, Lady Isolde spat, but words prove nothing. Then let's discuss proof. A new voice joined the fray. Renard Sloane emerged from a side door, escorted by Lord Ashworth's footman. His face was pale but determined. I managed Mercer accounts for 8 years. Every transaction in that journal passed through my hands. I witnessed forgeries, bribes, and worse. And I'm prepared to testify to all of it under oath. You treacherous little... I'm a survivor, Lady Mercer, just like them. Sloane pointed at Cale and Seraphine. The difference is, I chose the winning side. The crowd erupted. Accusations flew. Guests who'd invested with the Mercers demanded explanations. Others called for immediate arrest. Through it all, Lady Isolde stood frozen, watching her empire crumble. Finally, Lord Ashworth raised his hand for silence. Lady Mercer, you and your son will remain here as my guests until the Lord Chancellor arrives. Any attempt to leave will be treated as an admission of guilt. He nodded to his staff. See them to the East Wing. Comfortably, but securely. As Lady Isolde was led away, she paused before Seraphine. You think you've won? She hissed. But destroying us won't bring back what you've lost. It won't make you noble or respected. You'll always be the girl who was thrown away. Seraphine met her gaze without flinching. No. I'll be the woman who stood back up. And that's something you'll never understand. Lady Isolde was taken away, and in the great hall of Lord Ashworth's estate, surrounded by witnesses who would carry this story across the country, Seraphine finally allowed herself to breathe. It was over. They'd won. The investigation took 3 weeks. The Lord Chancellor arrived as promised, bringing magistrates and investigators who combed through every document in Sloane's journal and verified the land deed's authenticity. One by one, the Mercer crimes were exposed. Forged debts were nullified. Seized properties were returned. Bribed officials were arrested and tried. Lady Isolde and Aldrich Mercer were convicted of fraud, extortion, and, when witnesses finally came forward, the murder of Bastian Ashford. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison, stripped of title, wealth, and the power they'd wielded for decades. Cale's name was cleared. The banished Duke became a symbol of justice, a man who'd survived exile and emerged to destroy the corruption that had nearly destroyed him. The king himself issued a formal restoration of his title and lands, but Cale seemed less interested in his recovered dukedom than in the woman who'd helped him reclaim it. 3 months after the Ashworth Ball, Seraphine stood in the gardens of Thornhallow, no longer a decaying ruin, but a home restored to life. Her father had recovered enough to walk her through the grounds. Her sister Elise ran ahead, laughing at something Marin had said. You seem happy? Kyle appeared beside her, his presence as steady as it had become essential. I am happy. She turned to face him. My family is safe. The Mercers are gone. And I'm standing in a garden with a man who taught me that survival isn't just about enduring. It's about becoming something stronger than what tried to break you. I had excellent material to work with. Flatterer. Truth-teller. He took her hand. Seraphine, I've spent the past 3 months trying to find the right words for what I want to say. I've written speeches, practiced declarations, planned elaborate gestures. And every time I try to be eloquent, I remember that you're the woman who walked into a monster's lair to save her sister. You don't need poetry. You need honesty. He knelt. I love you. Not because you helped me destroy my enemies. Not because you're brave or brilliant or beautiful, though you're all of those things. I love you because you saw the man beneath the monster when no one else would look. You believed in me when I'd forgotten how to believe in myself. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver, set with a stone the color of autumn leaves. Marry me, not for strategy, not for protection. Marry me because 7 years of darkness taught me to recognize light, and you're the brightest thing I've ever seen. Seraphine looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life she'd built from the ashes of the one that had been stolen. Yes. The word was barely out before he was on his feet, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like hope and smelled like autumn and felt like every impossible thing she'd stopped believing in. When they finally broke apart, Elise was applauding from the garden path, and Seraphine's father was wiping his eyes, and Marin was pretending she wasn't crying. I should warn you, Seraphine said, laughing against his lips. I'm apparently very good at destroying criminal empires. You may have created a monster of your own. Good. Kale grinned. The world needs more monsters like you. That evening, they hosted a small celebration. The staff of Thornhallow, Lord Ashworth, Corwin, and Thessa, Renard Sloane in his new identity, and the families who'd been restored because 2 broken people had chosen to fight instead of surrender. Seraphine stood at the window as the party continued behind her, watching snow begin to fall over the forest where she'd once walked, expecting to die. Kale's arms wrapped around her from behind. What are you thinking? That 2 months ago, I was pushed toward a man everyone feared, expecting to be destroyed. Instead, I found someone who helped me become indestructible. You were never going to be destroyed. His lips brushed her temple. You were always going to rise. I just gave you a reason to rise faster. She turned in his arms, facing the man she loved. The monster who'd turned out to be her salvation, the duke who'd chosen exile over surrender, the partner who'd fought beside her until they'd won. They pushed me to speak to the man everyone feared, she said softly. They had no idea he was exactly what I needed. And what's that? Someone who understood that the only way out of darkness is through it. She kissed him gently. Together. Outside, the snow fell soft and silent over Thornhallow. Inside, 2 people who'd been thrown away by the world held each other close and proved that the coldest beginnings could lead to the warmest endings, if you were brave enough to survive them. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, the courage to face impossible odds, the power of being seen when the world looks away, the strength it takes to rise from ashes, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment with your favorite moment and where you're listening from. Subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even when they push you toward your fears, you might just find your greatest love waiting on the other side.